Hello, people of the internet, my name is Atlas, and I'm sorry for being late. I initially wanted to get this video out last week, but I ended up getting a bit sick, hence why my voice may also sound a bit off right now. Regardless, I believe I'm well enough that I should be able to record without much issue. Speaking of, today we are doing something a little bit different. Today, I would like to talk to you about Hollow Knight. While I haven't talked about it on my channel before, I have been a Hollow Knight fan for a very long time, and with Silksong coming out, now feels like the perfect time to revisit it. And how do I plan on doing this? Well, with what I hope will be the start to a brand new series. Today, I'll be making hypothetical charms for every Hollow Knight boss, from the abandoned Crossroads to Greenpath. And if you all enjoy this video, I would love to cover the rest of the bosses later down the line. Who knows, depending on what it's like, maybe I can even do something with Silksong. Regardless, let's go ahead and get into it. According to Zalubra, a majority of the time, a charm is created from the final wishes of a dying bug, with a few exceptions. This is perfect for our goal because, well, the majority time we beat a boss, they end up dying, while it still provides us with enough wiggle room to work around the bosses that don't. Now, I'm mainly going to be focusing on making these charms fit the characters, be it through their characterization or their behavior in and outside of battle. I'm not a game dev, so there's a good chance that some of the stuff won't be too balanced, so I'll leave that for you in the comments to figure out. So where do we start? Well, I know what you're all here for, so I won't waste your time and put her in the end or something like that. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. Everyone's favorite boss. One so good she needed 2 boss battles, even outside of God's home. The one, the only, Gruzmother. I mean, it just makes sense to start there, right? She's arguably the easiest boss in the game. Now, this was an interesting one. Gruzmother is one of the more animalistic bosses, so trying to analyze her in her death wouldn't work out super well in my opinion, and her behavior is fairly limited, mostly consisting of sleeping, throwing herself against the floor and ceiling, and exploding into babies. Now, as much as I wanted to make the knight explode into babies, I'm just not sure how practical that would be, since, you know, they'd already be dead at that point. Luckily, we do have her Dream Now dialogue that we can take a look at. And what do we find? Turns out the reason she was sleeping is because she's tired as well, which, to be fair, you'd probably be tired too if you had a bunch of freeloaders using you as their apartment. So I figured, why not do something with that? And so I present to you my first charm, Tired Eyes. As you might expect from an early game charm, its effect is fairly simple, but I think it could actually be something of a game changer. Tired Eyes would put the user under a dreamlike state that cannot be broken by outside interference, allowing them to stay focused even when being hit. In simpler terms, this charm would allow you to continue healing yourself even when you're hit by an enemy. Now, I understand this charm may sound kind of broken, and yeah, it probably is. Like I said, I'm not a game dev, but there are a few things worth noting. This charm does not prevent you from taking damage, meaning that just sitting there and trying to heal up to max health probably isn't going to work out for you, since most enemies, and more importantly most bosses, are going to attack you while you're doing so. Though it probably should affect how Boulder Shell works, so the combination isn't too powerful. Again though, feel free to discuss this in the comments, including charm cost, which I don't plan on covering since it's mostly a balancing issue again. Ultimately, the reason I went with this idea over others is because it felt like it would have an interesting effect on gameplay while fitting the boss. After all, it does seem like its main desire was to have an uninterrupted sleep. So then, let's move on to the next boss. One technically not found in the Crossroads, but would fit in just fine. The Vengefly King. And to be honest, it gives us even less than Gruzmother. We first find it when it's trying to eat Zoe, which is cool and all, but I'm just not sure if eating Zoe would have enough of an effect on the general gameplay. Its Dream Now dialogue is pretty general as well, with the main distinguishing features being the fact that it's mad, and trying to defend its pack of normal Vengeflies. Its behavior is kind of interesting though, not its attacks, those are arguably even more basic than Gruzmother's, but its tendency to screech and summon Vengeflies to its aid. Now, I think the most direct implementation of this feature would be through another minion charm, but I actually have another idea. Since I decided to give a certain other boss in this video a minion charm, the idea is this. What if instead of taking the summoning part, we take the screech? Introducing Monarch's Call. This charm releases a loud cry when its wearer has taken critical damage, disarming most opponents. When you have one mask, a cry will be heard, causing most enemies to run in the other direction, and temporarily pausing most bosses. Now, to prevent the misuse of this charm, it can only be used on the same enemy once, though this would, of course, reset every time you exit the room. I'm not entirely sure how this would work on bosses that don't have a stagger behavior programmed. Maybe it just wouldn't, or maybe they'd be stopped in other ways. For example, the Radiance just might not release one attack that you normally would. Regardless, I like the idea, so I'm putting it in anyway. It's almost kind of sad when you think about it. The implication that the Vengefly King's last thoughts would be to cry out to its subjects, a cry that would never be answered. Maybe this cry would even disarm Vengeflies completely, making them passive as a little treat. I mean, they're not really a huge threat by the point you get to this charm anyway. I just think it'd be a neat Easter egg. Alright then, let's talk about the most iconic Crossroads boss, the False Knight. Luckily, he's a huge improvement when it comes to characterization. He started out as a simple maggot, mistreated by Hallownest, and put at severe risk once the kingdom fell, being far too weak and far too fragile to survive in such a brutal world. So, in order to become stronger, he took the armor he wears from one of the 5 great knights, Hegemol. Now, it's not entirely clear how he did this. He was asleep, yeah, but you'd think a great knight would wake up if someone tried to strip them of their armor. In fact, how did this loser even put this on in the first place? How does he move it? Was Hegemol secretly a maggot too with custom armor so he could control it? To be honest, probably. But I don't want to step on Mossbag's toes, so I can't go revealing top secret information like that. The main point is, this guy wanted to be strong, to the point where it stopped being about protecting people, with him attacking random passerbys for seemingly no reason other than to prove himself, hence why he attacks us. You know, that and the infection. He also gives off the iconic orange infection goop, which I personally take to mean that he may have willingly taken it in to strengthen himself like the traitor mantises, and perhaps the fools in the Colosseum. Behavior-wise, he has quite a bit of diversity as well, such as swinging his club, and swinging his club, but with molten rock for some reason. Hitting him will also result in the knight gaining no soul, most likely due to his armor, and maybe the fact that most of it is hollow. Wait a second. Hollow Knight? Greater Dog, is that you? Anyway, I gotta move on quickly before Team Cherry deletes Silksong because of my insane lore leaks. While there's definitely a lot to work with here, and I plan on implementing some of it with my failed champion charm, I was struck with inspiration that I simply could not ignore. My friends, look at the most beautiful charm yet. Macebug. Yes, remember the minion charm I mentioned earlier? This is it. It would function similarly to the Grimchild, in that it would constantly have one singular macebug following you around. For the most part, it is grounded, being a bit bigger than most minions to help make up for it. But the real important thing here is that the macebug would have physics. That's right. Remember when the False Knight repeatedly smashed the macebug into the ground over and over and over again? You can now do the same thing. Only this time you can hit it into enemies for damage. Honestly, I think this would make for a unique and fun minion in this stage of the game, where you can't really get one. Not only that, but I think it's actually quite thematically fitting as well. The False Knight started out wanting straight to protect the others, only to end up brutally mistreating another bug. Macebug. Literally using them as a tool, so having them drop a charm that represents that change from their initial noble goal to their eventual hunger for power makes sense, I think. Plus, just look at this thing. It's so round, how can I not make this into a charm? This brings us to our final Crossroads boss, the Brooding Moloch. And this one's honestly more simple than the last. The Brooding Moloch's main thing is that it's alone, surrounded by the corpses of its own kind, constantly thinking about its isolation. As for behavior, honestly there isn't much to say. It shoots out goop, jumps, and slashes at you. Pretty simple. So going off the whole being alone thing, I present you Lonesome Ferocity. This charm essentially has a double purpose. In areas highly populated with enemies, it will increase the amount of soul gained, to replicate the Moloch's life being enriched when surrounded by others due to its social nature. While when there are few enemies, say 1 or 2, your nail speed will be increased. There aren't really many charms in Hollow Knight that actively change abilities like this, so I thought it could be a cool way to make one. It would probably be quite notably slower than Quick Slash given how early game the charm is, but I could still see some people going for it due to the 2-for-1 special. Oh, did I say that was the final Crossroad boss? Psych! You didn't think I forgot about the failed champion, did ya? Well, don't you worry. I did most of the character discussion with False Knight, so I won't repeat myself too much here. This charm idea was actually the first one I had, but I thought it would be a bit much for what is pretty much the first boss, so I placed it here instead. This is Empty Carapace. This grants the user immeasurable strength, but at the cost of their soul. In other words... Actually, no, that is pretty much just what it does. Okay, maybe it's not immeasurable strength, but you get the idea. This charm majorly increases the damage of your nail while reducing your gained soul down to 0, making healing and spells completely impossible. This idea came from both the actual mechanics of the fight, with the main gimmick being that you can't gain soul when he's in his armor, but also, of course, the fact that he chose power over his moral values and figurative soul. As for how this would work with Unbreakable Strength, I think lowering the damage and charm cost a bit on this one, while still having it be enough so that combining the two isn't all that practical, could work. But to be honest, Unbreakable Strength is so good that it's kind of hard to work around it with a charm like this. With that, we can finally move on to Greenpath, which luckily only has 2 bosses for us. Starting with a fan favorite, of course, we have Massive Moss Charger, which in reality is not one individual creature, but a large group of normal moss chargers coming together to control one giant clump of moss. Much like the Moloch, Mossy is a pretty simple character, if you can call it that, but it, like the normal moss charger, does have some pretty distinct characteristics. Specifically, they're quite bold when in their protective moss coverings, but once those are destroyed, they're quick to retreat. This fast-paced battle strategy gave me the idea for this charm. Mossy Courage. This charm is best suited for those who attack quickly and dodge quicker. In other words, it grants the knight a temporary speed boost whenever they land a successful hit, or get hit themselves. It's not the biggest boost, but it could definitely still come in handy when you really need it. Honestly, while this charm isn't particularly flashy, I do still like that it came out being fairly practical if nothing else. And finally, we have Hornet. Now, I don't have quite enough time in this video to do a full Hornet character analysis, as unlike the others I've talked about so far, she actually, talks and stuff. So there's a lot more I could say about her. But I do still want the charm to connect to her in some way. Speaking of, we find ourselves running into our first real outlier when it comes to charm creation, since you don't actually kill Hornet here. So we have to come up with some other origin. And the way I've chosen to solve both of these issues is by making this charm not come from Hornet herself, but the fallen shell of a previous vessel that she once slayed. By doing this, we can connect this charm to Hornet, while saving some of the deeper stuff for her Kingdom's Edge battle. After all, as you'd imagine, this vessel's last thoughts would likely relate to her. So, here we have it. The Regret Catcher. It restrains the regrets of events long since past. As you may imagine, this charm will bind your shade whenever you die, allowing you to collect it without it fighting back. Furthermore, when you respawn, your soul gauge will be full, or as full as it can be. This helps hint at Hornet's goal in stopping the vessels, and the connection that she has to pale beings, while still being fairly simple enough that the average player hopefully won't be too confused. And here's the best, but probably most broken, part. I'm sure some of you are thinking to yourselves, what about Steel Soul mode? Well, in Steel Soul mode, it would do nothing. Until you get the Shade Soul, upon which you find that it has gone through a transformation of its own, essentially becoming an improved version of King Soul, now aptly named Kin Soul. With each branch of the family now represented, with Hornet Silk, the 2 white fragments, and the void of both the Shade Soul and the Regret Catcher. This would serve as a reward for anyone who has gotten this far to help them in the end of the playthrough. Think something like the Expert mode drops in Terraria. Since you have chosen a harder challenge, you have earned a better reward. I also think this would just be a cool moment on a blind playthrough, asking yourself what it'll do this whole time, only for it to finally pay off in the end. I don't know, I'm sure some people wouldn't like it since they may want Steel Soul to be purely harder than the main game, but this is all hypothetical anyway, so I figured I may as well have fun with it. Anyway, that's all for this time, folks. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you enjoy Silksong too. I know I will. Here's some more Hollow Knight in the futures, huh? Speaking of, if you want to see more in the future, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let me know. I'd love to hear some of your own ideas too. All that being said, drink water, remember to floss, and don't forget, the impossible is possible. All you gotta do is make it so. Good night.